Thank you, Sean. That was very, I know a lot about the program as well, and I have some questions, but Iris has a question first. Iris, do you want to talk or do you want me to read your?
Just go ahead. Yeah.
What is Oregon? Is it based in Australia? Also, for schizophrenia, are there RTC happening in Montreal? Are these competitive platforms or different types of research on mobile apps?
Yeah, no, great question. And so Origin, Origin it is started in Australia and they had a huge amount of investment, and it's basically designed as an early intervention approach for young people, and started by a psychiatrist named Pat McGorry. And so Origin's very extensively implemented in Australia as a model, though it's been picked up all over the world. A similar model is called, oh gosh, what's it called? Youth Wellness Hubs. That's it, Youth Wellness Hubs. Joanna Henderson at CAMH is leading this. It's kind of a version of Origin. But the idea is one-stop shopping, early access and intervention. And Origin does have a digital health platform that they do make available to people that access their services. It's a lot more generic. It's not necessarily spun towards psychosis or a particular indication. It's meant to be a lot more broad, actually. So it's a bit different. And there are a few platforms, to be sure, out there that are that I would say, could be considered as competitive. I'd say that we're pretty competitive too. We're not, there aren't many people in particular working in the severe mental health challenge space. And a couple of things we're trying to do to be unique, I suppose, is being slow and careful in evidence generation, is doing these trials and doing this work to make sure it's working, and being really engaged deeply in co-design. So yeah, we will see. There are other technologies out there, and we will see where it all lands.
So we have at Home on the Hill, we have a recreation program, and we have a number of family members who have members with severe mental health challenges. So we will definitely, if you send me the poster, we will send it out to our families. Also, I'm connected with people, all over Ontario and outside of Ontario and in the US. Can I make it available to them as well?
Sure. I'm just going to make a note to send you stuff after this, Joni. Thanks. So at the moment, we are just recruiting in Canada. So anywhere in Canada, we're fully virtual. And so, the assessment parts and all consent, all that jazz is virtual. We aren't in the U. We're only in the US in the sense of our validation trial happening in California. There are some. It mostly has to do with privacy and data and privacy legislation. It's quite different in the two countries. So you kind of need, if you want to do digital health in two countries, you need a server bank and a whole setup in the other country that does all the security and privacy stuff that's relevant in that country. And as I mentioned, we are quite a small shop and we are running on fumes all the time. So we're a little limited in terms of what we can do in the US. But for the time being, Joni, if I'll send you our poster, Canada is great. And, frankly, if there are people interested in the US, we are open to having conversations and seeing, are there other sites in particular that want to pick up this stuff and give it a try?
Okay. There's another question. Is there a family caregiver component to the apps for use by caregivers?
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit, and we have engaged caregivers quite a bit in trying to think about how this would work. It's something that's on our list of things, because we kind of have the things that we can afford to do and we're focusing on. And then things that we know are important and that we're going to come to, and it's a part of the plan. And so this is very much high on that list. I think at the moment, we've been primarily focusing on care providers, hospitals, and the like, because that's for us at the moment the most efficient path to trying to get this tested, commercialized, and move forward. We have engaged, the organizations. They've all renamed the schizophrenia societies across Canada. We have engaged, which tend to be family focused. I have reached out to folks in NAMI which is the kind of huge family support organization in the US you're probably familiar with. So early discussions, but we do see there is a path there. Just be trying to figure out how we, what's the mechanism? How do we make it available to people, and how does it work? But we do agree that that this would be a tool that we do want to make available to family who could facilitate access to people, just like providers would.
Yeah, I think family caregivers are important to be engaged, because most of the times we're not engaged by psychiatrists, psychologists, or even
absolutely.
discharge planning. So it would be great to know, to help implement that with our children, and also know what's going on as well. I also want to say that I've been involved with Pat Deegan, and it's amazing that I've been trying to bring in the hearing distressing voices stimulation and stimulator to our groups and to Canada. And if you do not, most people do not understand what your children are going through as far as auditory hallucinations and delusions. And if you see the stimulation, I've tried it numerous times. I actually do not know how our loved ones go through the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's why, we spend a big chunk of our, our time has been trying to, how can this help with that? And it all goes back to, like an example. I've worked with many folks who hear voices and have hallucinations, and just that the guy who's just tormented by these voices. And, if he could enhance or improve just a little bit his ability to try and shut them out into the background, bringing his attention somewhere else. And maybe this tool can help that too. It's really important. But it's Pat's she's quite the tour de force, an amazing story, and just had a huge impact. And she's still at this. She's still working in this area.
Yes, I'm trying to get her to come to speak with some of her colleagues. Another question I have is cognitive remediation therapy. I understand that it's mainly for research based in Canada right now. Dr. Best is doing it. Is there any clinicians that our families could, have our family?
Yeah, and that's a question that comes up a fair bit, and it's a tough one. And as I mentioned, there's a couple parts to cognitive remediation. One is like using a program like Happy Neuron, where you use the program to practice cognitive skills, and anyone can get a subscription to Happy Neuron. I mean, it's a great program, and it's out there. It's what we used in our trials. The trick, though, to having cognitive remediation work and help improve people's day-to-day functioning and daily lives is that translation over, and that's where you do need a fair bit of clinician support to do that. And it's been challenging to implement. We've got trials that show it works, but getting programs to buy into it and pay for it, because it's not inexpensive to provide cognitive remediation, has been an uphill grind. And it's kind of, you might have heard the bench to bedside problem, in where you'll have tests and trials, and this can be in medicine, physical health medicine or otherwise. It's often 20 plus years when you go from those trials that show, hey, this works, we've got to use this, to it being available. It's a gap. And so at the moment, unfortunately and sadly and frustratingly too, it is still only really existing in the area of clinical trials of people like Mike Best and Chris Bowie and others who are doing this work. But I've been fighting the good fight. Cognitive adaptation training is another community-based intervention. It's not digital, but it involves OTs mostly engaging people, doing assessments, providing adaptation-oriented environmental supports. We have great outcomes with that in community functioning, as we have a CAT specialist hired with operating dollars. And by that, I mean, she's not working on a project money at CAMH. We're expanding that. So I can just say that it's slow and challenging, but we will get there. But I know in the moment it's frustrating. All I can say is that outside of keeping an eye out for clinical trials to get involved in, we did build, with cognitive remediation, it's a little more tricky. We built a family manual for cat. Like, this is part of my effort, recognizing that cognitive adaptation training.
Yeah, do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up. I don't know when he sleeps and when he sees his children, but but
It all happens. I'm even
I was involved in CAT in the very beginning,
I
and I use
remember,
it in my own house. But you can talk about it quickly, and then we have some other questions.
Sure. Yeah. So CAT's a good example. It's not digital, so I'm getting away from kind of digital stuff. But it basically, you do an assessment with the person, neuropsych kind of assessment, attention, memory, problem solving, and it's very OT based. It's really kind of, this is just good OT practice, maybe with some tweaks. But people roll up their sleeves, get in people's homes, help them build plans to work around their mostly environmental challenges, because we see with people with more severe versions of schizophrenia in particular. They've got a lot of disorganization in their environment and a lot of routines and behaviors and habits that aren't helping them. And so do really intensive engagement, setting goals, practice, coming back, lots of supports and supplies. And we found in trials, you can get really great gains in functioning, community functioning with folks with quite severe versions of the illness. And that was really exciting to me. And I've done lots of talks. It's been a while, but on recovery oriented care and the recovery movement and all that stuff, nothing has ever beaten CAT for that, because clinicians would see a person that they don't want to say they've thrown in the towel on, but they think the person's plateaued. This is it. This is where they're at. And we had some gains in those trials where it's like, wow, look at what's going on with so-and-so. Look how they're looking, look how they're doing. And so, we just spoke about the challenge of getting these things into regular clinical environments. So one of the things we did is we co-designed with families and built a family member manual. And if you bear with me,
I was involved in some of that in the very beginning.
Yeah, I'm just family strategies. Portico has been a little clunky lately. Yeah, here we go. It's up. So I'll throw this in the chat, but this is an example of us. We've got videos and a family manual so families can implement CAT. It may not be as effective as, and we trialed this too, may not be as effective as having an OT turning up on your doorstep to do the work. But it's better than nothing, right? So that's what we did. And with cognitive remediation, it's a little more challenging. All I could suggest is you can read up on it. You could get a subscription to Happy Neuron. You could support your person in using that. And I think it would really come down to, let's say a person is working on memory in the games, is trying to get them to challenge themselves in terms of memory in their day-to-day life. Maybe it's prompts and some reminders, some CAT strategies might work in the area of memory, but trying to get them to reach a bit, stretch a bit, and try out things. It's like going for a grocery shop with somebody and shadowing them and seeing how they do and having them practice the skills that they're doing in the games. That's basically cognitive remediation. So I wish I had something better to offer and suggest, but it's a challenge. Coming back to an early point I made, the World Health Organization pointed out that there's this idea of illness burden against investment. So we know how much, and by burden, I mean in the broadest sense. I mean, in terms of costs to society, cost to individuals and families. And every illness has been costed in that way, cancers, heart disease, and so on. And so there's a very smart people believe that we are underinvested in mental health care, in severe mental health challenges in particular, about 70 or 80%. So we need about 4 or 5 times as much money in our system as we have now to really provide all the evidence-based approaches and treatments that we know could work. Of course, prevention's better, so the earlier we can intervene, all this stuff. You've probably heard this before, but that's the kind of frame, and this is where, advocacy, this is why I say this kind of thing in this kind of a venue. I talk to reporters, I do science for papers where I say these things, just constantly trying to highlight that we need more resources, because there should be no reason why in a wealthy country like Canada, people can't access things like cognitive remediation or evidence-based supported employment, or there are many different things, supported education, things that we know work, and people should have access to. So anyways, I get off my soapbox. It's getting probably tiresome for you.
Okay, so I have Kathy. Would you like to ask your question?
Oh, Well, actually, I don't know if my question is, it's more of a comment. You mentioned texting a little while ago,
Yeah.
and at Home in the Hill, we now have recreation therapists working with our people. And we've had their service for probably about 2.5 years now. And what is kind of interesting is there is several ways in which they reach out to clients. For example, Zoom or whatever, but texting seems to be the most
Yep.
what's the word, effective. What's your comment about that? Do you have any insights? I mean, I have my own insights, but why would you think texting is so popular?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's it's kind of ubiquitous, whether it's mental health populations or otherwise. We find, like, our trials, for example, with youth who've experienced homelessness, we see this as well. Like, forget it if you want to leave a voicemail or or have a phone call and stuff, but texting, it's kind of become such a common way for many people of engaging that it's effective for clinicians as well. And it's been good to see, for a while there, organizations felt texting was kind of risky. What if you get a risk indicating text? I've always questioned that. I mean, someone could always call and leave a voicemail on my phone at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday about risk, and I don't get it till Monday. So I don't know what the difference is between that and a text somebody sends. But anyways, but organizations have moved on and can text and have come up with ways of doing that safely. But I think it's a cultural thing, to be honest. It's just people are so immersed and like those rapid fire, quick interchange exchanges. Probably something's lost in that, but yeah.
Well, I think it's like non-invasive, and it sort of puts the person in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
I mean, they can refuse to respond.
Oh yeah.
But they also can respond. And so I think that's sort of empowering in a way, that ability to choose whether you're going to respond or not. That's my insight anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of access and things, like a place like Toronto, where you could spend an hour and a half in in the transit system or sitting in traffic and stuff to go see somebody. If you can get some questions answered or do some stuff in a few short text exchanges, I mean, it's far preferable.
Yeah.
I find that this population of our children only like texting, and they do not like the phone. They don't answer the phone. You can't reach them.
Yeah, I almost
So
consider it bizarre to get a
only way to
phone
get
call.
them. But I do know from my son is with Home on the Hill, the recreation therapist, and with a peer support worker at CAMH. And I know it really, if he has something on his mind or he needs some help, I mean, they're talking back and forth, and it could be, early in the morning, late at night, and he gets instant, help right away, which is, I think, fabulous. So I think it's a win-win situation for them.
Yeah, agreed.
Annette says, how many are in use now?
Of A4I, our current techecnology?
Yes, and are they available? Where are they available at CAMH?
Yeah, so at the moment, we've got about, I think, 100 or so people in California using A4I. We've got somewhere around 20 folks in our general outpatient schizophrenia clinics using A4I. We've got 60 or so people in our randomized trial. So at the moment, we're limited in terms of how much we can scale out in terms of how much use we can support. Like I mentioned, is a technology like this you do on the back end of it. And again, this is stuff that I learned. It's not like you kind of build it and then just the computer runs it. It takes work on the back end to maintain, to keep it running, moderate the chat, all this stuff. So there's a cost to running it. So at the moment, we're only able to do these deployments in California and CAMH. We're going to look to another healthcare center and then the trials. So those are the spaces where we've deployed so far. We're hoping to scale it out more, but the way to access it, unless you happen to be, a downtown east, west, or central at CAMH, or you're in Riverside, California, which would be kind of nice in some ways. The only way you could access it is through our trial. So, and anyone's welcome to, through the email address I sent. Someone could get on A4I in 2 weeks if you felt like it.
Iris, you have a question?
Yeah, I just, I was going to ask Dr. Kidd about the point you made that people may be dormant for a couple of days and not active, and that's indicated on their phone. You said that might be interpreted as intrusive. So has that been scrapped or is that being used? Because I do feel that is a very practical point in time when people are deteriorating.
Yeah, I mean, such a great point. And there, I think, and it's something I should have mentioned is what we need, and there are, we're not the only ones, there are others working in the space too, for sure, is we need a lot of data. We need to understand what is risk for an individual. And it's not going to be the same from one individual to another. Like we have some general ideas, like if somebody's suddenly, you know, up a lot in the middle of the night or never leaving their apartment, or there are these indications that we know are probably an indication of risk. We'll see it sometimes in our feed, like when people are posting stuff. We have not really had high risk posts like I'm gonna hurt myself or somebody. It's more like just some really confused stuff is coming up in the feed. Somebody is putting in posts that just, I don't understand where you're going with this. Then, you know, these are examples that we're seeing in early days that suggest that, hey, maybe something's going on. And in our trial, we'll give the person a ring. We'll call them up and say, hey, we saw this post and we're not sure what it means. Or you've noted, the case manager in our trial might pick up, hey, you've noted that you've had a week of terrible sleep and that you're really unhappy this week. That's where we're at. But, you know, ultimately where it's called machine learning, or digital phenotyping, there's all these words that, or these terms have been applied to it. But how can a technology like this learn for the individual what for them means risk? And I think this is where we need to get to, and we haven't arrived yet. And there's the question of, okay, some risk is flagged. And then the other key question is what happens next? Is that, and this is where the person's choice needs to come in. It's almost like advanced directives a bit. It's sort of like when a person's well, they kind of need to say, hey, when it's like our wellness recovery action plans is another example. When I'm getting unwell, I want my sister to know, my sister to find out. I want my psychiatrist to get a flag. So it picks up risk and then is a notification. I think the person needs to get notified themselves, say, hey, A4I has noticed that you're not, you don't seem to be doing so hot right now. Maybe you should reach out to your supports, and here's what they are. Maybe a flag comes up with a case manager who's prompted to give a call instead of waiting till the next appointment. Maybe,
yeah, I think that would be the key part.
Yeah, or maybe
the two-way thing of them actually calling saying, you're supposed to check in every other day.
Yep.
It's been a week.
Yeah, or it's it's between appointments, or we talked a bit about family engagement. When family are networked in, and not everyone has the good fortune of having family engaged, but it might be just sort of, and we heard from family members, they don't want to know what's going on all the time and don't want tons of information, but they would like to know if something's going sideways. And that's where maybe a note goes out to brother or mom or whoever to just say, we've had this signal, it might mean that something's not going well, and just give a nudge. And that's to your point. Like, I mean, it would be fabulous if the 2 days before, the week before, some alert goes out that says this person needs checking in on.
Yeah, but my question is that been scrapped from your platform? Or
No, that's something we're pursuing and we're really interested in. What we need, and this kind of comes back to funding, so like a lot of it comes back to funding, is we need to get the resources and have the mechanisms come. Sorry, I realize it's getting darker. I'm in front of a window and it's getting darker outside. I'm gradually disappearing. But we need the funding and the mechanisms to get A4I in the hands of thousands. We need data people to have a look at the data, and we need to test and build out how this system will work in a way that's safe, responsible, and effective. And so to do that, we just need to get bigger. We need to have more capacity, and it's something we're really interested in it. And it's actually one of our biggest priorities is risk detection, and to try and get ahead of risk. So we're working hard on it, and by no means have we stopped doing it. I think what I try not to do is there are some folks working in this space who oversell it a bit and say they're further ahead than they are. I just want to be very cognizant of how challenging this is going to be and how much hard work needs to happen to get it working well. So, yeah.
Another question here is, can the tool help with a person with delusions when they believe the delusion is reality?
Great question. And, actually far more people struggle with delusions than active hallucinations, mostly auditory. So we were in the middle of a build of something called, we're calling it the troublesome thought detector. We've got our auditory hallucination detector, but it's basically something that helps people figure out, if they've had a thought, they are not sure about it, and it walks them through a process mostly based in CBT to help them land in a place. Do I believe this thought is correct and real, or is this thought perhaps a delusion or not grounded in reality? And then they can rate themselves and get clues and tips and all that stuff. So we're building basically, you could call it a delusion detector, but it's broader than that. This could be just as much about a very low self-esteem thought, I'm worthless or whatever, just a thought that's not connected with, with what's real. If a person doesn't, if the person truly fundamentally believes their delusions are reality, something like that probably isn't going to work or work very well. And we know, of course, people will wax and wane. This is where the troublesome thought bit, I think, could be helpful in that, most folks with delusions, they will have some delusions that clinicians might call fixed or just really connected to and not then seeing as reality. But other things, maybe they have some questions about. And maybe you start, this is what, like psychotherapy, what you do, you start with the ideas that the person is willing to question. Maybe it's about self-esteem. Maybe it's about whether their neighbor likes them or not. But other things like my TV sending me messages that they're really convinced are happening. So you start with the ones where there's flex, you help them practice testing, questioning, changing those ideas. And then a psychotherapist can be a little sneaky. Then you kind of move closer and closer to the delusions that are fixed. So they can practice in safer territory, then move to the more challenging ones. But there will, and as I mentioned, this isn't going to be the answer for everyone. It'll be figuring out, there will be some folks, their delusions are really fixed and they're not going to let go of them. They see them as reality. We're not going to reach with a tool like this, but maybe we can help them get some exercise. So it's kind of, it's all trying to find the angle that you can work with a given individual. Yeah.
Another question, would this work with someone with anosognosia?
Okay, I'm just looking this up here. Yeah, so maybe could the person who asked that question just elaborate a little bit on what you're looking at with that and where you're coming from?
So the person who's asking that, the person has schizoaffective disorder. They don't realize that they they have any medical diagnosis at all, and they believe they're somewhat psychotic and manic at the same time, and they will not take medication, and they do not believe that they're ill. So trying to, but they do like video games, and they like their phone. So
yeah, I mean, and that's something I think we've tried to design this, and and there will always be folks that this is some providers offering this has stuff around it with the word psychosis and schizophrenia. This isn't for me. This is some medical thing. There will always be folks that just say no thanks, and that's unfortunate, but okay. But I think we've tried to build this, it's got a social feed. It's got a lot of content that has nothing to do with psychosis. It's about anxiety and depression and being more social and remembering to go for lunch with your sister and get to an appointment, whether it's with a psychiatrist or whoever. So there's a lot of it that's pretty generic, that's geared towards anything. So if a person, doesn't buy that they have schizoaffective disorder, knows that they maybe have a few challenges related to psychosis symptoms, but don't want to call it psychosis, this could still work with them. They'd have to be okay with taking on something that is associated with, does use the word schizophrenia here and there and psychosis, and is okay with that.
So that leaves out a lot of people, probably the sickest, the ones that are so hard to reach.
Yeah, well, I think I think there will be, since we are going to be relevant for folks that because we're not diagnosis heavy in the content and the use of this. Because of course you're right. There's going to be a lot of folks that don't believe they, won't go with the diagnosis for a range of different reasons. I think we're okay. We've been finding, I can say that in an environment where this is the most likely to happen. So an early intervention environment, of course, younger people can tend to be the group that have the most problems
Right.
for a range of reasons with diagnoses. We've found it broke out in thirds, trying to work and engage there. So 1/3 of people, we never could find. They said, oh, maybe we're interested in this, maybe we're not. Here's my email, here's my phone, or whatever. We're interested in research, and they never pick up their phone, or email address doesn't work. So 1/3 of people we just can't connect with to do anything with. 1/3 heard about what we're about and said, nah, I'm not so interested. 1/3 we're interested. So in the end, if we can only engage 1/3 of the whole population, I think it's still okay. And then just be trying to figure out, for those, learn more about the folks that said no thanks, and try and figure out maybe there are versions of these tools that don't have anything, on the face of them about psychosis, but can help them with diet and exercise and anxiety and other things that they might be more open to working on, and then work towards the other.
One of the things that I've noticed from taking all, CBT courses and recovery in action, and working with psychiatrists and psychologists and peer support workers, is that I am using my own son as a test model, but because, if you say somewhat to, track your delusions or track your voices, or see how, your behaviors and thoughts and feelings are, during the day, and trying to see how you are doing on a daily basis and tracking your moods, they won't do it. I mean, they may start it for a week, and the psychiatrist or psychologist or whoever they're seeing may, say, let me see how your couple weeks have been, and they'll write it down for one day. So I was tracking a number of people, and we did it on their phones. They were doing their tracking their voices, delusions, and behaviors and modifications, and it went really well. And so that, or else talking into the phone, so that it's not effortless. Like if they're having a bad day, they're saying, I'm having a bad day. My voices are saying this, and I really am getting out of control. I'm getting scared. So that the clinician, then the next day they'll say, oh, I had a great day. I went to visit my brother. I went to see a friend. And my voices were 5 out of 10. And so it was a good tracking mechanism. And we did it in a very small trial basis with our families. And it was really well received and my son does it to this day. He doesn't have to use paper and pen, and he can show whoever he's talking to, because he tends to forget, I had a great day. But then 5 days before, he had, terrible delusions or manic or whatever. So they forget. So this is a good way of tracking. And I think that your tool would really help with that.
Yeah, tracking in and of itself, if you can get it done, can be great for individuals and clinicians both.
What about confidentiality?
Yeah, so it's something that we has a whole bunch of layers here. So we are very careful. Like A4I doesn't gather and isn't intended to gather much personal information. We need to know someone's phone number to actually get it onto their phone. We need to know, the person's connected with X clinician, and to send them that information. But it's not really about gathering much personal information. The feed that I mentioned, the peer-to-peer feed's moderated. So if anyone posts anything like, my name is Jane Doe and I live on X street and here's my cat, is we reach out, we don't let that post go through. We reach out to them, just remind them this is an anonymous feed and we don't want that information shared. Here's how you could reframe that kind of thing. In terms of security, there's all of these technological measures in place to make sure that the app can't be hacked, that what data is there is protected. And then as well, everyone goes through a process of being made aware of how this works in terms of privacy and confidentiality, so that we're transparent about it and how information's used, and those things. So we've got a pretty high standard to make sure that it's as we're trying to manage this as carefully as possible. And we're, I don't want to be immodest, but compared to a lot of technologies which just willy-nilly scoop all kinds of data about us, we're pretty buttoned down.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's fascinating. But could I ask you something? You mentioned different groups, and it has seemed, I'm asking, does it seem as if there's a greater proportion of males dealing with schizophrenia than females, and just in your experience?
In terms of averages, there's the age difference is males seem to get affected earlier, a few years earlier on average, sort of the later teens and early 20s, and young women a little bit later. And there is the idea that and then maybe this plays out in how you see schizophrenia in terms of how unwell people are. There's the idea that young women and women may do a little better with schizophrenia because they, on average, they've had a little bit longer to develop skills. And, if schizophrenia hits you at 25, you've had more years to develop life skills and to kind of develop than if it hits a young man at 16 or 17. And so we'll tend to function better in the longer haul. Again, on average, there's going to be a huge range. So that's one idea. But in terms of prevalence, I think it is tipped a little bit in the direction of being more prevalent for men, and then some subpopulations, like, for example, African Caribbean populations. There's evidence suggests as a function of stigma and discrimination. Some subpopulations are known to have more prevalent have more prevalence in certain communities related to challenges they face. And so I guess the long and short of it is that there can be that there, and then there's just a bunch of layers to it. I think it's quite a complex question. I think the challenge in research, and maybe this is where your question comes from, is many studies have just recruited from the most readily engaged folks, and those will tend to be mostly white males, and people already going through clinics and things like that. And that's where there's a criticism happening in a lot of science, schizophrenia, just saying, most of the data that we have about clinical trials and about the illness and all this is coming from just one large, but just one part of the population.
Laura, go ahead.
You mentioned something earlier about possibly developing something for opioid addictions.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, for those with like dual diagnoses, will there be some type of cross-platform accessibility for those?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, what we ultimately want, we never intended this just to be kind of a schizophrenia platform or application. It's we kind of want it to have multiple components. So imagining a provider saying, okay, here's an individual, they've got a psychosis tied that maybe is a bipolar kind of psychosis, and some depression, and they're really addicted to marijuana. So here's what we'll hit, click these boxes in the A4I, menu, and then they get content and tools related to all those things intertwined. That's the ultimate goal. And so what we're doing is starting in schizophrenia, and then I'm really excited. We're already built an advisory and are getting focus groups started on opioid addiction. Really excited to see where that goes, because a lot of what A4I is about is pretty cross-cutting. It's about reminders and CBT-based content and a social feed and all of these functions that are relevant, whether you have psychosis or you have an addiction, in the connection, the platform with providers. So yeah, we're really excited to do that. And I completely agree. It's a big problem in digital health. It mirrors services where it's okay. You've got your addictions app, and that's over here, and then over here you've got your app for your app for depression. The same thing as in clinical services. You've got your addiction service, and then you've got your CBT for depression. Yeah. We need to do better at integrative approaches, and we're going to have a go at it if we survive and if this all works, this whole endeavor. Like I mentioned, the 1926 and building cars thing I really feel at times like we're in such early days, even though we've been at this right now we're long haulers in digital health, having lasted 5 or 6 years. Most are kind of a year or two and then disappear. So, but we'll see. Wish us luck.
Okay, wow, awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Two last questions, which I think are going to be hard to answer, but if someone wants to engage in psychological services with you or any type of getting psychological services, how could they get in touch with you? Are you in private practice, or can you be a referral through Access CAMH?
I appreciate the question. Unfortunately, I'm going to have an answer that's not the hottest. As hard as cognitive remediation is to access, is I kind of am even harder. And it's not because I think I'm special or something. It's just that with my life, between a house that's falling apart with contractors who don't turn up, 2 children, running all these research studies, is my practice, my clinical practice is truly microscopic. It's just I see only a small number of people, as I mentioned, on Thursday evenings. And so in practice, what that means is I have just a ridiculous wait list. But I work out of West End Psychological Services. There are great clinicians there, and there are other practices in the city with really qualified people. And yeah, but I wish I had a good answer to that. But maybe at some point, once all these projects fade and if I semi-retire, I'll have more bandwidth for direct clinical work.
If anyone needs names and numbers of psychologists, I do have a list of CBT
Fabulous.
and cognitive remediation therapists. Another question, which is not going to be a good one, is how can one access a psychiatrist at CAMH?
Yeah, so there's Access CAMH is something happened several years ago, which was good, creating one front door for all access. And so it'd be Access CAMH. The access is pretty quick, relatively speaking, and a person can get an assessment, a connection with a psychiatrist, and a consult. It doesn't necessarily guarantee ongoing care with the psychiatrist, but you can certainly get an opinion, and they can work with a GP. And in some instances, people will go on to get services at CAMH. So Access CAMH is definitely the way to go for that. And if you just Google Access CAMH, you can find out everything you need to know. There's a phone number and to get you started.
So is the bridging service still in operation?
It is, yeah.
So could I used to refer a lot to the bridging program, but now it seems like there's mainly only one-time consultation, and then referred back to the psychiatrist, to their family doctor. So how does one access the bridging program now?
Yeah, it all kind of rolls off of the assessment and capacity at any given time in terms of getting access to more ongoing services related to how unwell the person's doing, the complexity of needs, those sorts of things. So that it would be through Access CAMH. I guess it kind of comes back to, unfortunately, to that problem of the resource problem that I mentioned at the very beginning, is just having not enough capacity to see everyone who needs help. So yeah, but I think that's where I'd steer people is through Access CAMH.
Iris, would you like to talk about what you just put on the screen, please?
We keep coming back to the funding issue, and there is a petition. Apparently the percent of funds dedicated for mental health is about 7%. And this petition gives some other benchmarks in France and UK and so on. And the petition is asking whoever gets elected, it should be maybe 11%.
Fabulous. Yeah, thanks for putting that up. I think this kind of activities
send
really
that to your
important.
different friends and so on. It certainly can't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's a key part of the picture here. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
2 last announcements, and it's not for you, Sean, so don't worry. I want you to go see your kids, but one, we have a cookie fundraiser, and that's thank you to Katrina. So throughout the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Courage Cookies will be donating proceeds from every purchase to Home on the Hill. You can help buy cookies online for delivery or shipping, or ordering via Uber Eats at couragecookies.to, and ordering online for and they will donate 5% of their overall revenue. Any and all purchases throughout the month of May will support Home on the Hill. Courage Cookies is located owned and is a locally owned Toronto business with 2 storefront locations, one in Stack Market, Front and Bathurst, and Dundas Street West, and offers delivery across the GTA and shipping across Canada. Every month, they will choose a local organization that is working to make an impact and support those in need in their community. They have over 30 rotating flavors and also make gluten-free and friendly and vegan cookies. You can see next Wednesday from 12 to 5, Lily, Katrina, myself, and one other person will be making cookies. And we hope you come by, or please buy the cookies so we can help support our programs at Home on the Hill. And I will send that out to everybody, but they are delicious. I've ordered them. I've sent them to my friends and family, and I am never getting out of my sweats again. So also, Leslie has arranged a flower shop for our group, and Liz Kennedy is going to be doing a workshop with us on Friday, June 17th at 11 at Maggie's House in the Gardens. So I will send that out to you. And there are only 8 spots. Leslie and I are starting a walking and coffee group. Our first one will be February 27th at 11 o'clock at Cover Notes. Please RSVP to Leslie or I, because we will be needing space in the coffee shop, but it will probably be outside that we will have our coffee. And we have lots of other programs, but with that, I'm mindful of the time. I want to thank Dr. Sean Kidd so very much for an incredible presentation, very interesting, and we hope that you succeed in your endeavor, and we will definitely pass on the word. And I'm a part of a couple of American organizations. One is NAMI, and the other is Team Daniel and One Mind and some others. So I'm going to send you a list of possible collaborations that you may want to get involved in.
Great. That's great.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Really nice connecting, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening, and please look online for our programs, and I will be sending you more. Please buy a cookie and help support our programs. Thank you very much, and have a really great evening. Thank you.